Welcome to the Stop Suffering in Silence podcast with your host, Denise Walsh and Rachel Timothy.
Hey, you guys. Welcome back to Stop Suffering in Silence. My name is Denise Walsh, and I'm here with co-host Rachel Timothy and a very special guest. And so I am going to let Rachel introduce our special guest and the topic for today.
Okay, so I think this might be my favorite guest yet. Sorry, everybody else. But I have with me my oldest son, Levi.
And her favorite.
He's 12 years old. And it took me back that he wanted to be on the podcast. He sent me a message. Actually, he was in his bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's often how Levi will communicate with me, something that's hard. But because it's easier for him to write than it is for him to speak things sometimes. But he sent me a text and he said, can I be on your podcast? And I was like, well, what do you mean be on my podcast? Like, I
thought I said it clear as day, but whatever.
Yeah, well, it takes parents a little bit, but he wanted to talk. He wanted to share. He wanted to give some of his experiences and things that might be helpful for other people to learn. And so, Levi, we're excited to have you.
Welcome to the podcast, Levi.
Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to chat with you, and we have not prepped or anything, so I do not know what you're going to say. You don't really know what questions I'm going to ask, and so we're just going to have a real raw conversation about childhood anxiety. And so I'd love, Levi, for you to first share a bit about why you wanted to talk to parents about what it's like to be a child with anxiety.
Well, I really just wanted to come on the podcast to say if what's that?
When you were in your room sending your mom a text, what made you send it?
I'm just really into podcasts right now.
And so why did you feel like you'd have value to add?
Because I've experienced it.
You've experienced
firsthand.
Anxiety as a child.
You remember, here's a great example for you, something that both him and I went through anxiety-wise. Whenever I was taking him to the dentist one time, he had to have a particular procedure. And because
I remember this.
Yeah, because I had other kids with me, they weren't going to let me be with him back in the room because we couldn't have littler kids back there. And for a lot of kids his age, that probably is no big deal. But for Levi, because of some of the things we've been through in the past, he feels fear in situations where he doesn't know the adult that is around him. And so I tried to explain to the nurse who came to get him, he has anxiety. He has some trauma from his past, and I need you to be very cautious of that. And
she sure wasn't.
She wasn't. And she assured me that they know what they're doing and that sort of thing. And they walked him down the hallway to go back to the dentist office. And I sat in the waiting room and I was praying, and it wasn't, but maybe 5 minutes later, she came and got me and she said, he is acting ridiculous. He is way too old to be acting this way. And he was in a full-blown panic attack. They had him on the laughing gas drugs. They were holding him down, trying to get him to breathe in this stuff. And he was in a panic attack, and she was treating it like he was throwing a little baby fit. And that's not what it was. And it was traumatic. It added to just not trusting adults in those situations. And I don't know, what was that like for you?
Well, she just sat me down there, and I was like, oh, what is happening? I don't like this. And my nerves took over, and I was like, oh crap, here it comes again. And then she was like, okay, well, I'm going to get your mom. And that was a little bit more calming, but at the same time, I couldn't get out of my little funk. And then when she got my mom, I don't know what she did after that. What happened after that?
Well, I was with you from there on out,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you were. It was pretty quick procedure, and I think she kind of laughed a little bit and was like, "See, it really was no big deal." But I think adults understanding a child with anxiety, it can make a big difference for that kid.
So it sounds like you were able to recognize, oh my gosh, my nerves are brewing up again. Like I'm becoming
Yeah.
overwhelmed with anxiety, which means it's happened to you before. Is that right, Levi?
Many times.
So what does it feel like when your nerves take over, as you say, and you're kind of welled up with anxiety? What is your body doing? How does it feel?
Well, it gives a little sense of like the Hulk, where like you can't, like you're like this big green thing that you can't control your like emotions, and like it just like all comes out.
And so is it your heart racing? Is it your body like trembling? Is it shortness of breath? What do you experience?
Well, asthma. I got asthma, so like that's like shortness of breath doesn't mean nothing, but others, yeah.
So the
Okay.
heart racing. Do you feel like you need to run away?
Yes. Okay, you want to tell them that story?
So, do you want to?
Yeah. Why don't you tell them
You want
that?
me to tell it? So we have another situation where it kind of shows. I think that the adults did a good job in this situation.
Yeah, they did really good.
So we can maybe compare.
It
the
was
two.
just I was at fault.
You weren't at fault.
Well, a little bit.
You had an anxiety attack.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still at fault, but okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, but that's the interesting thing is
Yeah.
that anxiety is anxiety. And if it pops up, there's things that we can learn to support ourselves in that situation, but it's not a blaming situation, right? It's
Oh,
nobody's
yeah.
fault, right? So, but what I think is interesting is if you feel blame or shame when you have an anxiety attack, then I wonder if that makes everything even worse.
Yeah, 100%. You feel like you caused this, and like, yeah.
And
I
then
didn't
that,
know that.
You did?
I didn't know you felt that way.
Oh,
Because
well,
what's not your fault.
I know.
Okay.
I know that now.
Okay.
well, and that's another thing to think about, right? You can cognitively know it and still feel sad
And not be able to control it.
Yeah.
right. Okay, so tell us about this next situation.
So, as some of you who know my story, there was a point where we moved from Southern Illinois. We moved to a new town. And so that meant Levi was starting a brand new school. And he struggled trusting adults, struggled being away from me, struggled with feeling like whether or not mom was safe or not. And he just, we called it kind of a social anxiety.
Yeah. For a while there, that's what y'all called it.
Yeah. And so anyway, we're going to this new school and we're trying to help him feel comfortable with staying with these people that he doesn't know. And there was a PE
At the
teacher,
house, right? Not at the school or at both.
Say that again?
Well, you said you're trying to make him feel comfortable staying with. So are you thinking about the house, the new people?
Oh, the house, I was completely fine. I was with my parents. I was completely fine with my parents.
yeah, no, at the school.
Okay, so it's when you're not with your parents at the anxiety.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
'Cause- yeah. Well, so here he is at this new school. It's a pretty big school. And
It was like a pre-K to, no, it had high school in it, didn't it?
it did. It was pre-K through high school.
Yeah.
And every morning drop-offs were terrible for his anxiety. It was to the point where as soon as he would see the school off in the distance, he would start hyperventilating. And we would pray and we would try to calm him down, get him to take deep breaths. And I never knew each morning, is he going to get out of the car? Is he literally going to walk into this school building? And sometimes he did, and he did it with tears streaming down his face. And I would tell him, you are the strongest kid I know, because I know in your mind, you're literally walking into like a war zone. That's how it feels with the anxiety. But he still, like you said, cognitively knew it was safe, but his body was feeling something different. And so for him to have the strength to get out of the vehicle and to walk into that school, it was huge for him. Some days wasn't as smooth as
No,
others.
Not at all.
So one particular day, he did get out of the car. He did go into the school.
It was like till recess time.
And I don't know all the ins and outs, but he had an anxiety attack and he literally fled the school. He took off running and he went out into the parking lot running, and a teacher followed him.
Yeah.
And kind of had to take you down.
He kind of pulled an inner linebacker on me.
And I don't know all of the ins and outs except for that he was trying to get you to breathe.
Yeah, I couldn't.
And he couldn't breathe. He was trying to take deep breaths and making all these noises. And so they gave us a call as far as what happened. And one thing I appreciated is the school's like, what do you guys want to do? How do you guys want to handle this? And so we talked to Levi on the phone. We went to the school and we sat with him and we reassured him until he was ready to go back to class. And I think part of it was, I think it was helpful for him to know that we would come if called. Like, we will be there in 10 minutes. As soon as they call, we will be there. And for him to see that and know that, I think was helpful. But there was no shame. The teachers were not angry at him. He didn't get punished. They understood anxiety and were a lot more compassionate with him as a result. They didn't enable it, but they did show compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Those are very two different situations where one is saying, come on, kid, get over it. And then the other is saying, what do you need right now? How can we help? And so if you think about both adults in the same, obviously different situations, but yet anxiety feels similar in both situations. Why, Levi, do you think it was important for somebody to say, what do you need right now?
It was, more of a reassuring thing to know, like, they can help with my needs that I need in that current moment. But, like, also, if I need it again, they'll do it. Mm-hmm. When I need it most.
Yeah. So you felt supported in the moment, but then down the road, if anxiety rose, I think feeling not supported makes the anxiety worse. But if you know my mom and dad will come if I need them, I can go to the principal's office. There's a counselor here, or like you have options and you know that you'll be believed and supported. That would hopefully keep the anxiety down rather than exacerbate it if it happened again.
What was different from like the school that I went to previously? I don't think there was a counselor, right?
Mm-mm.
It was just there's just this one teacher, the PE teacher. He was the best. I loved him. He was the one who absolutely tackled me in the parking lot to get me to calm down when I ran away from school. But yeah, he was like he was the go-to man for me, like spazzing out.
You had a go-to man. You had someone you could go to if you really needed it.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how long it took for the anxiety to start to decrease at that school, and then what skills you started learning and utilizing to help the anxiety go down.
It took a while. I would say like 30 minutes at least.
Okay.
Like, it depends on like.
Would you say at the end of the year in June, were you still having such a hard time getting out of the car?
No, I feel like I did better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So maybe at Christmas time, were you still having a hard time getting out of the car?
Yeah.
So one thing that I've noticed with his anxiety is like when we would have breaks and things would change,
terrible.
We would get out of routine. So coming back from Christmas break, it was almost like it started all over again. We had to get used to it again.
Okay.
But once he was in the routine and could feel a safe feeling, going there in the routine of knowing how it was going to be, it seemed to help him quite a bit. Having that go-to person. And then his teachers were very good at communicating with me and would give me information as the day was going along. And I could give information back like, hey, tell Levi this. And it would give him a little bit of encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say by the end of the school year, we were not crying when we got out of the car. He had friends at school.
Yeah, the kids were amazing. I love the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, I think that was another important thing is the teachers would talk to the kids about what anxiety looks like and that this isn't Levi's fault. He had a Christmas play at that particular school.
Oh, yeah.
And he had an anxiety attack on the stage.
It was bad.
It was bad. And bless his heart, like it was the year after COVID. So all the kids were wearing masks and we were decently far back, but I could tell he's starting to lose it. And you would see the kids next to him start patting him on the back and, encouraging him and telling him you can do this. And even though he cried through the entire
thing.
Christmas program, he got through it. And everybody was like cheering for him, proud of him that he didn't run off the stage. Just things like that were really, really cool.
That's really important. Okay, so when you're at the school, at about 30 minutes in, you started to calm down. So what types of skills did you start learning to get yourself, as you called it, out of the funk or get your anxiety decreased?
Just don't forget about it. Just don't absolutely brush it under the rug. Acknowledge it.
Okay.
And make sure it's there. Just don't hide it.
Okay. And so how would you acknowledge it? Would you just kind of tell yourself, all right, I'm feeling anxiety right now, and?
I mean, just calm down. You've gotten out of this before.
Okay.
Nothing new.
Okay. Yeah. Those are really good self-affirming statements. You can do this. You've never died with an anxiety attack before. You can handle this. I've done it before. I'm strong enough. And that self-talk, intentional self-talk, walks you through staying in that fight or flight mode, that freak out mode, versus getting into, okay, I can handle this.
Uh-huh.
And what other skills did you learn to do?
Well, that's basically what got me through that whole year. But there was
counseling.
Oh yeah, I liked my counseling, dude.
So one really cool thing about where we lived is his pediatrician office actually had on-staff counselors.
Yeah.
So we could, as if we were going to the doctor, we would have appointments with their counselor. And the guy was young. He was cool. And I think that going to him gave Levi a place to talk about anxiety where it was not like this taboo situation.
Yeah.
It felt normal to be able to discuss this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there was points where the counselor would ask Levi questions like, have you ever had thoughts of harming yourself, or, some deep stuff. And Levi was always real and honest. And the counselor was like, he has great depth to be able to speak what he's feeling. Like the fact that he can speak these things says a lot about him. But there were times when we first started, they wanted to do counseling with him without me in the room.
Oh my goodness, no.
And he couldn't even handle me stepping outside on the other side of the door. I had to be in the room. And I remember the counselor asking you on a level of 0 to 10 being the worst, if mom stepped outside that door right now, what would your anxiety be? And Levi said a 12.
Yeah.
It was that
freak out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
by the end of the time you guys living there, did you have to stay in the room the whole time, or did you eventually move to the lobby?
I did go to the lobby, I think once or twice.
Once.
Not for the whole time.
No. Half of it.
Yes.
Maybe not even half.
Maybe not even half. But we got there.
And Levi, what skill? So number one, talking about it with no taboo, just being able to say, my body is freaking the heck out. And again, you can cognitively be like, I know I'm safe, but yet my body is freaking out. So you're able to talk about it, talk to the counselor about what your body's experiencing, maybe some fearful thoughts that are coming into your head. You have learned to have self-affirming thoughts and talk yourself through, which is a huge skill. Goodness, a lot of adults don't even know how to talk themselves down out of a situation.
Yes.
You're able to use those self-affirming thoughts. Did he teach you any other skills to use when you're in the midst of a panic or anxiety attack?
I think he just talked.
He had you start journaling. Remember that?
Oh my goodness, I would never do it.
Okay, but you started to once you moved here. You started doing nighttime before bed.
Oh, yeah.
To get all of your anxious thoughts out of your head. He would write it down on paper.
I couldn't sleep unless I did that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal. Instead of it going over and over and over again in his head, as soon as he was able to write it down, it would kind of release it.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal. I'm trying to think what else we did.
Some other things for anxiety could be like exercise, bike riding, things like that, like body, like physical stuff.
Yeah.
and certainly I'm thinking of like deep breathing or the grounding exercises, like getting yourself back in the moment instead of in freak out mode. Did you learn any of those to utilize at school?
Well, I kind of just like daydreamed about like the worst that could happen. So like I just have to like get myself out of that daydream and I should be fine.
Intrusive thoughts.
Yeah,
are
basically.
major.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that would make anyone have an anxiety attack.
Yeah. Yes.
Daydreaming about the worst thing that could happen. Yeah, that'll do it. And so, but that's interesting information, right? You're like, oh, that daydream is triggering my body.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating, right, Rachel, we talk about this in 90 Day U-Turn all the time, is that our imagination is powerful.
Yes.
And we spend a lot of times imagining the worst case scenario, which puts our body into fight or flight mode. Or we can use our imagination to think about what it is that we want. And guess what? Our body starts to respond there too. So for you to recognize, okay, this is a daydream. It's not happening right now, and it impacts my body is hugely helpful, because then you can say, all right, I'm going to take that thought captive and I'm going to choose a new thought. And that's how you talk yourself out of it.
Yeah. And I think it's extremely important for adults to realize you see a kid sitting there, you don't know what thoughts are rolling around in their head. I mean, when he would sometimes finally verbalize what had been on his mind, I was like,
yeah,
okay. Like now I get why you're freaked out. But when you don't know and you just assume, oh, he's throwing a fit, it makes the matter worse.
And I just think about some of the kids I worked with when I was in counseling. And I mean, there were times, it breaks my heart, but there were times when police were called because, a kid was having a freak out attack and it seemed to be, a behavioral issue. Well, every behavioral issue is linked to an emotional issue.
Yeah.
And I think so often we see that freak out, or we see the running, or we see the whatever, and we're not getting to the heart of the matter. And I'm so glad to hear, Levi, that you had a group of adults that did get to the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
Now, tell me a bit about, because you have moved several times.
Yeah.
And so you had an experience when you moved to this last locate, like 2 times ago.
Yeah, I know.
But you now
Couldn't keep track anymore.
to a whole new state and a whole new everything, right? Did you feel like you were starting at ground zero with going to a new school?
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
Okay. So even though you had learned skills that had helped, it still felt just as scary.
Yeah. It's like you don't know what the people are going to be like. It's a whole new state. You haven't met anybody. Yeah.
So one thing that I found that, and I think this was helpful, and he can tell me if I'm wrong, but we would pray together about like the situation coming. And then I would have a tendency, more so than him at the time, but could see where some of those prayers were being answered. Little things would happen while we were there. And I could say to him, see, God heard your prayer. God is here. He's answering it. He's taking care of you. To give him a bit of reassurance that God's right here with you too. So like, for example, at this new school, they just so happen to have a really stinking amazing counselor on staff at site all the time who understood and was able to give him time out of class if needed, a chance to take deep breaths. I mean, so many great things.
Yeah.
And it was God. It was like a reaffirming for him.
You found your new person fairly quickly.
Yeah. It was like the first or second day.
Well, yes. And I called ahead of time before school even
Yeah,
started.
I know you did.
Who here knows about anxiety? Because I have a really special kid coming.
Well, and I
better watch out
too to think about, okay, how can we prepare? Because again, it's preparing can help to decrease that anxiety. So if you go in knowing, all right, we're going to find that person who's your go-to person if you need it. Now that you know that you need it, and, at the first school, you luckily found it, but it wasn't necessarily something you knew to ask for. Well, now you know to ask for it. And
Yeah.
so you can, even if the anxiety is still high, the goal is that it doesn't last as long in terms of like months and months and months and months, because you're able to set yourself up for success much sooner.
Yep. So
Yeah.
we have a game plan. We did have a game plan going in, and
What was the game plan?
that you would be, well, we had the game plan of reaching out. I reached out to your regular classroom teacher. I reached out to the counselor so that they both were aware and you could verbalize to them when you needed to take a break. But what we found interesting as he grew, so then the next year he goes into the middle school, they don't immediately let you go to the counselor when you need a break.
No, you have to like put a referral in.
So he has had to learn to take some deep breaths on his own and deal with things on his own.
Honestly, that's done better for me than having it like just like a snap of a finger. She can be there. It's just a coping skill to breathe and stuff. It just became more natural.
So it was good for you to be able to learn some of the skills you could do yourself in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then knowing you have support if you need it, but having something that you can control, like your breathing, journaling, your positive self-talk.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't have said that back then.
No.
He was ticked off that they weren't taking him into the counselor's room right away.
I had to wait a whole day to get in there.
Yeah.
And by that time, it would have been gone.
Oh, and I have to tell you, that counselor, I'll never forget, she messaged me the first time he went and said he was in 6th grade. And she goes, I think maybe you should buy him a phone so that he can message you anytime.
She talked to me about that. I was like, yeah.
No.
Try to convince my mom. Try to convince her.
I'm sorry. That's
do your
not
best.
the
Do your
answer
best.
to anxiety. And she wanted him to be able to have like tracking to know where I was at all times. And no. Let's teach him how to breathe.
Yeah.
Well, again, we're like, okay, that would probably help your anxiety and it would make you more obsessive.
Exactly. Yes.
The goal, right, is to be okay, even and trust, even if you don't know where your mom is for, a couple hours, right?
Yeah.
And then, so, okay, I've got a lot of questions for you, Levi, because you've grown so much from the 5th grade Levi, 6th or 4th grade Levi, who's running away from school because the anxiety is so high. And now your mom we leave once a month ish to do speaking engagements where you don't know where she is. Luckily, she's with me usually, so that's good. But how have you been able to handle and cope with and grow as your mom isn't just at home or outside of the office, right, or in the lobby, but now she's traveling and doing speaking engagements?
Yeah, I have to like remember like this is what God's calling her to do. And I was like, if I get in the way of that, who am I?
Okay. Excuse us for a minute.
Amen, brother.
Okay. So, Levi, you're able to see the big picture. The small, like
in the moment,
in the moment anxiety, which again is a huge skill that you're going to use for the rest of your life. Being able to see the big picture versus the in the moment need, Rachel,
tissues?
I'm okay.
There's tissues out there. You can get them.
It's all right. Proud of you, kid.
Thanks.
So do you have to use your skills then? I mean, are you experiencing anxiety or is the anxiety less?
Less, 100%.
So it's not happening as much. So when it does happen, you use your skills, but you don't need them as much because you're starting to trust the world around you.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, there's been times in the past when he would have his iPad, so he would have Kids Messenger or whatever at that time, and he would message me. And if he couldn't get a hold of me,
I would freak out.
He would freak out.
There was one of the times where you were on stage with her and like at an event, and she wasn't answering. Oh my goodness!
Yeah, my phone blew up.
Yeah,
and
she was up there speaking. It was
but. My understanding is things kind of blew up here a little bit too, and but as the time has gone on, now when you can't get a hold of me, you can pretty well guess I'm safe,
Well, I talked to Dad, and he calls you, and you normally answer Dad for some reason.
Oh my goodness. Anyway.
Not if she's on stage, though.
No.
Well, no, not
I
at that particular moment.
To remember, right? If she's available, she will always
Yeah.
answer your call.
Yes.
She will always respond. But
Yeah.
if we're in a meeting talking to nurses, or if she's on stage, or if there's a podcast or something,
Yeah.
as soon as she's done, she'll respond, right? And so it's not this, the goal, right, is that the anxiety doesn't go into, oh my gosh, my mom's unsafe. The goal is my mom's busy, but she'll reply when she can.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's grown a ton. It's been pretty cool to see the progress. And we thought about this the other day. I never would have thought that he would be where he is now when I saw what when he was in 4th grade and he was running away from school and
Yeah.
literally fighting us to not go to school. It's amazing what God can do.
You have no idea how many times I faked sick to get out of school.
Oh,
It was so bad.
Yeah.
Every day. I don't feel good.
And so, is there anything you wish teachers or parents or adults, youth group leaders or whatever understood about anxiety that would be helpful for them to know?
Well, that not all people go through it, and it's just like there's only words. Like I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Is there anything you wish an adult would have done differently?
Definitely would have known the problem a little bit more. Like this kid has anxiety, so we need to do something a little bit different than we normally do with the other kids.
Be trauma informed.
Yeah.
Be anxiety informed. Yeah.
And what would you say is the best thing that an adult did to support you when you were having an anxiety attack, or when maybe you felt one coming on?
Not to make me feel worse about it, like my old school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the old school, or even the dental hygienist, created shame. This was a choice. You're doing it on purpose. This is a behavioral problem. Grow up, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's not what to do when a child is experiencing anxiety. And oftentimes, right, parents, like behavioral issues stem from emotional issues, right? So if there's running away, if there's tantrum, if there's, I just think of my kid who would refuse to speak and and hide in a corner. That's not a behavioral issue. That's an emotional issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to address the emotional issue by supporting the child. And sometimes I would even sit with them on the floor for an hour until his body started to relax a bit and he was finally able to talk. What did an adult do well, Levi, that you think parents could duplicate?
Well, they assess the situation. Okay, we know this kid has anxiety, so we need to make sure we calm him down before we talk to him.
Yeah.
That helped a lot if they calm me down before they talk to me.
Yes.
Well, I think our emotions adding to his emotions just create more of a disaster.
Yeah.
If we can be calm and taking deep breaths, he seemed to mimic that. One of the things that I learned is if I hold him, especially when he was younger, and I start taking deep breaths, his body will mimic that because he would be breathing so quickly in that hyperventilating mode. But also he would want to isolate. He'd put himself in a corner as well and not want to talk, not want to come out. But he always feels better when he does actually talk. So giving him a space to do that and not just being okay with him isolating.
Right. So it sounds like giving him a space to first of all, physically calm down. And we talk a lot about this too. You can't process what's happening in a freak out mode. So we want to calm down, relax our body, get our nervous system kind of back in check. And then we can start processing through what created the anxiety or triggered the anxiety to begin with, and then assess what to do differently next time, or how to handle it in the future, or how to use your skills on a consistent basis so it never doesn't get that high.
Yeah.
Anything else, Levi? Any other stories that you think would be a good descriptor for parents to hear?
I don't know. Mom? I mean, she
Well-
probably remembers the stories better than I do.
So some of the things that we battled big time were when to push him and when to listen. So I can't remember the term, and you probably know, Denise, that the counselor used, where basically you have to live it. You have to push yourself through it in order to get through it.
Mhm.
I can't think of the word that he used, but it was hard to, like, when he didn't want to go do something fun that would have been fun, because in his mind, he had worst case scenario, intrusive thoughts going through his head. And it's like us trying to push him to go do something because we know it's going to be fun. Would you just listen to us? Because I promise you, this is a birthday party. Like, you're going to get cake.
Yeah.
You're going to get to watch a movie. And he's freaking out. It's like, when do you force him to stay, force him to sit and try to enjoy the moment? And when do you give in and allow him to come with you? And, like, that part has been hard for me, on knowing when to step in and when to not.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll say I have that with Owen, like, and he's not having anxiety. He's just being a child. I'd rather stay home and play video games. And like, no, get in the car. We're going to basketball camp.
Yeah.
So how have you decided? How have you navigated that, Rachel?
Goodness. I know for a long time when he was younger, I would go ahead and want to just scoop him up and take him with me. Because I understood the anxiety. I have anxiety, and my heart broke for him that he was having to go through that. But the more that I saw him miss out on some really neat opportunities, and the more that I saw that he was not growing in the way that I think God wanted him to grow, the more we started talking at home about, okay, well in advance, this is what's coming. This is what you're going to be presented with, and this is why you're safe, and why mom and dad say it's okay. Even like going to the water park, Nashville Shores, with a friend, like talking to him ahead of time about it. And you have everything you need to be safe. You can call us at any point. And then once he got to start to experience some of those moments where he could be proud of himself for getting through it and see the fun that could actually take place, I think then we weren't so much butting heads, but working together with the anxiety.
Understanding and like being able to talk freely about anxiety and how and what it is, and it's not true, it's just how our body feels. And so we want to, all of that, I think, allows the conversation to happen and externalizes the anxiety a bit, rather than instead of saying or feeling like, I am bad, I am anxious, we're like, oh, anxiety's got a hold of me right now, and and you can talk through it.
That didn't sound good.
That's super helpful. The other thing I heard you say is the preparation piece. Like, totally Google it, right? There is a tutorial for everything. Before we go on roller coasters, we were like, all right, boys, YouTube Cedar Point, get familiar with it, enjoy it, get excited, because most things, when they're new, they're going to increase that anxiety. And so I love you can YouTube the experience and allow them to see the trailer, so to speak, no matter what it is. So that way they have an idea of what they're heading into.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowledge is power. Speaking and communicating, for a kid, especially that doesn't have the verbiage to be able to explain what's going on in their mind, you become captive to those thoughts if you can't speak it. And so I think us talking about it as much as, not overdo it, but talking about it gave him a place to release it. And I'll never forget, I was so proud of how, like, especially when he was little, he would go up to people and he would say, my name's Levi and I have anxiety. And
Yeah.
And in a way,
I needed everybody to know.
But he was okay. It wasn't something he was ashamed of. It was the same as the fact that he has asthma. Like, and okay, he's got anxiety. Now we know. And, he wasn't afraid for people to know that piece of him. And I wish, mental illness and all things like that can be shamed, and that's not what it should be. It's just something that somebody's battling that we should all be helping them through.
And it sounds like, Levi, you are already starting to retrain your nervous system. You're already starting to retrain your brain to have new automatic thoughts, right? Where at first you are automatically daydreaming the worst case scenario.
Yes.
Now, you know what I mean? You can take that captive and think about something else. So is there anything you want to add to either children who might be listening who have anxiety, or adults who might be listening who either have anxiety or are around people who do? What's your final message?
I don't know.
Would you say
really
it's
got
not a death sentence?
Say that again?
Anxiety is not a death sentence, meaning like you
Yeah.
can,
You can
can
overcome
get
it.
better. It doesn't last forever. You
Yeah.
can learn skills to grow.
hmm
Well, you did good, bud. Proud of you. You did a good podcast.
Thanks.
A lot of people would have anxiety about doing a podcast.
That's true. That's true. Rachel, is there anything you want to add before we end?
Oh, I never thought that this day would come where he would want to do this, but I'm grateful he did. I think he's got a lot of wisdom in that head of his that people could glean from. So I'm grateful that he wanted to speak out. And he's taught me a lot. I can tell you that. He's with being my firstborn, and he's gone through quite a bit. But to see the strength in him to not give up and to look to God to heal, and it's been pretty cool. So
Still, if you need issues.
Everyone's giving Levi a big group hug right now.
yes, I'm proud of you.
Well, Levi, really, you are learning skills right now in 7th grade that like adults sometimes don't even know. So just know that the things you're learning now are taking you on a completely new path, one where God can use all parts of your story. So you can be a safe adult someday for anyone who has anxiety.
Yep. Agreed.
All right, you guys, we'll give Levi some love in the comments below. If you have anxiety or panic attacks, we'd love to hear what coping skills or strategies you've used either in the moment or on a consistent daily basis. So that way the anxiety doesn't get so high to begin with. These are all things we talk about and teach in 90-Day U-Turn, where we can gain control of our nervous system, get out of fight or flight mode, retrain our automatic thoughts so we're not living in worst case scenario, but instead we're living a life that we love and are thinking about things that are going to take us there. If you are interested in getting started with us and joining 90-Day U-Turn, then absolutely join our waiting list, email us. All the link and information is in the description box below. We'd love to have you. We're going to be starting a new round in just a few months. So thank you, Rachel and Levi. And for everyone, we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your school, your church, or on your podcast, then please email openblindeyes@protonmail.com. If you are interested in sponsoring a survivor on their healing journey and would like to donate to Stop SIS, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below, or you can email stopsis@protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence, or you know somebody who is, whether they're dealing with a current trauma or one from the past, then we will always recommend that you reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.